Our friends at Touro University have provided for us an extremely appropriate guest for an Erev Tisha B'Av here at JM and the AM. Dr. Julie Golding is with us live via telephone. She's a Holocaust educator and director of an MS program in Holocaust, Genocide and Tolerance Education at Touro University. She's also author of a recently published book, Unseen Scars, Vicarious Trauma at Holocaust Museums, Exhibitions, and Memorial Sites. On this Erev Tisha B'Av, we say good morning, Dr. Julie Golding, and thanks for joining us here at JM and the AM.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Tell me about the book first. How recently was it released? And what is the basic theme? What is the reason you wrote the book?
With pleasure. So my book, Unseen Scars, was published in February. And for decades, we've really devoted important scholarship to understanding the trauma that's experienced by Holocaust survivors and often their children as well. But I realize that we know far less about the emotional impact that this history has on those who teach it and those who learn it. And so that question became the inspiration for this book. And the book explores what psychologists call vicarious trauma, which is the emotional impact that can affect educators, museum professionals, students, and visitors to museums and to those who engage deeply with Holocaust history. Wow. And it doesn't really stop there. One of the central ideas that I introduce is vicarious resilience, which is the idea that while we can absorb other people's pain, we can also absorb their strengths. And difficult histories like the Holocaust expose us to these really dark moments, and they also reveal extraordinary courage about others.
You know, I've had, and it's interesting that we're speaking on Erev Tisha B'Av for a number of reasons beyond the obvious ones. I've said many times on this show how the person who writes a book about Eicha or Kinnis is jealous of the one who writes a book about Purim or Megillas Esther. And what do I mean? What I mean is that, you know, if it takes a year or two to write a book, the person who's doing it regarding Tisha B'Av is, you know, enveloped completely, you know, drowning in the topic of mourning and disaster in Jewish history. And obviously the one doing the book about Purim is, you know, it gets to surround themselves with a completely different atmosphere. And it's so funny that you started with this, that one who is, one who deeply dives into a topic like this, Holocaust, genocide, etc., it really can affect their psyche. You've proven my theory.
Absolutely. I spent about 8 years researching and writing this book, and it really grew out of my experience working in Holocaust museums, working in schools. I've interviewed so many people, both students and people who guide trips to Poland, people who work in museums, to really understand what is this that's going on. And, you know, as time passes and we transition from this era of lived memory to historical memory, we need to think about how we're doing this responsibly and what it means to engage, both for those who teach it and those who learn about it.
Very interesting. And I remember as a kid, it must have been on Yom HaShoah in middle school, where our teacher was reading a story from the Holocaust, and literally in the middle of the story, one of the children in the class just broke down and cried. I don't think it was an inappropriate story, you know, when it came to Yom HaShoah, but it was just, you know, it was difficult for them to sit through it and to hear it. And and obviously that was, you know, in a regular classroom setting, just minutes into a story. So to me, that validates, you know, what seems to be one of your theories, that someone who goes to a Holocaust museum or just has this, you know, minutes long or half hour long or hour long encounter with this topic can in fact actually be traumatized.
Yes.
How does one research it? Like, you have to interview, I don't know, 1,000 people who've visited museums and who didn't have family and who didn't grow up with stories like this?
So I surveyed visitors to the Museum of Jewish Heritage, when the museum was hosting a very large exhibition called Auschwitz Not Long Ago, Not Far Away.
That's New York City.
And yeah, in New York City. And, that exhibit is right now in Washington, D.C. They're redeveloping the new museum down at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. And as a temporary placeholder, they've brought in this exhibit. So the exhibit had been brought into New York City when the Museum of Jewish Heritage was redesigning their exhibit. And I surveyed visitors there. And I asked a lot of questions. I asked, what is your experience like? Was it meaningful? How meaningful was it? What did you learn? How were you emotionally connected? And I used some, a museum experience scale to ask that question. And I also asked students about what's called their ACEs, their adverse childhood experience. So have they previously experienced a trauma? All different types of traumas. Were they descendants of Holocaust survivors? Have they ever met a Holocaust survivor? And looking at all that data helps us understand what does it mean to process this information when you yourself have background knowledge or background traumatic experience before coming into this space. We don't come in as a blank slate.
Yeah,
we bring in our own ideas. Right? And our own histories.
Right.
So that child that you spoke about who broke down 5 minutes into a class, you wonder, was there something there? And then taking it to the next step, how could the teacher have done something differently to keep that student engaged?
Understood. Dr. Julie Golding's with us, director of the MS program in Holocaust, Genocide and Tolerance Education at Touro University, author of the book Unseen Scars, Vicarious Trauma at Holocaust Museums, Exhibitions, and Memorial Sites. And she's with us live via telephone, and how appropriate on this Erev Tisha B'Av, when, of course, during Tisha B'Av, so many, both individually and as a group and as a community, so many focus on the Shoah, on the Holocaust, for obvious reasons. Not to suggest that you need to do this or to tell you how to do your job, but I'm just curious, have you ever engaged in a survey or interviews with those students who've been on March of the Living? With what I have in mind, obviously, that they were there on the spot and saw up close and personal at least the sites of where our predecessors suffered in Europe.
I have not. I hope others will. And I hope that the framework that I've set up will continue and that others will take this study and use it in their own research. There's very little data about what it means to visit Holocaust sites. I was really surprised when I set out to do the research that there was so little to be able to work with.
Well, one of your students may do it.
I hope so. I surely hope so.
Is this, and again, I'm just so curious. I think it's such an important topic, but I wonder in 2026 how many are interested in it. Are you speaking to a good number of students? Are there people still in our community at college age and a bit beyond who want to participate in an MS program like this?
Absolutely. We launched this program a year ago. And within a few short weeks, we started with a beautiful cohort of students who are really dedicated to teaching about the Holocaust. And since then, it's only grown, and we're seeing tremendous interest. Some people think, maybe post-October 7th, and other people say, I've been on, this is really important. And some people say, I've been on March of the Living or another trip to Poland, and I need to do something about it. So we definitely have wonderful students who are doing this across the United States and around the globe.
And it's got to help with other areas of life. I mean, I have to imagine that there is trauma that seeps into people's lives from personal experiences. They go through a sudden death of a friend or relative, just as an example, and so many other situations. It has to help those who just are interested in the general topic of trauma to help others deal with it.
Well, teaching the Holocaust is a really important subject. It's part of our history.
Right.
And, we're coming up to Tisha B'Av now. We're going to be sitting and talking about the Holocaust. and about Korban and about all sorts of other difficult moments in Jewish history. And so a lot of the ways that we teach about the Holocaust, through stories, through testimonies, through artifacts, through objects, and these are things that we train our students to do, are definitely applicable for teaching other difficult histories.
Yeah, no question. By the way, Eicha itself is a visit through trauma, because if one really analyzes the words, they'll get a perspective on what happened during the era of the destruction of the temple that will frighten them, frankly, with what individuals had to go through, with what mothers went through, with what communities went through. And we, in the lap of luxury and freedom, have so much trouble relating to this. Anybody who really pays attention tonight, they'll get a perspective that is so foreign to them.
Yes. I think part of it is that it's in Hebrew.
Right.
And if we don't quite understand what we're saying, the story doesn't hit us in the same way. But, one of the things we do in Holocaust education is cultivate empathy, which is this connection to the story. And there are ways you can do that. You'll often see in a lot of museums' mission statements or organizations' mission statements that they want to cultivate empathy and feelings for other people. So when we do that correctly, the story becomes really powerful, as you just said.
Very good point. All right. And then, of course, there's some look, this is an education program. I mean, what you're doing at Touro University is obviously an education program. And, we wonder about how to teach, how to educate those about the Holocaust. So there's always an issue of, I know in New York, there's always an issue of, public school youth and should they be taught about the Holocaust and is it necessary and how to do it if, in fact, you get the opportunity to do it. Is there a better way to, in fact, teach youth about the Holocaust, especially those who don't have a Jewish background?
We have Jewish students and non-Jewish students in our program.
You have non-Jewish students. Interesting.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. Our students are incredibly diverse. Many are current classroom teachers who want to strengthen their knowledge and confidence in teaching about the Holocaust. We also have museum educators, school administrators, professionals who work in education and public policy. And one group that really surprised and inspired me is the number of people who are looking for a meaningful second career. So they're retired or they're transitioning from another profession and they want to dedicate this next chapter of their life to something really meaningful. And for them, it's teaching about the Holocaust in the next generation. And because we're fully online, we have students from all over, and they're bringing very diverse experiences and perspectives to the program and to the classroom. Hey,
can I ask you a question from your perspective? The term, feels like Germany 1933. It feels like Germany 1939. There's so many different references that people are now making when it comes to the United States, New York City, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think of that? What do you think when you hear that? And do you think it's a vast exaggeration?
I think we need to educate people about what happened in Germany and how it happened, how it unfolded, and what were the differences between Germany of the 1920s, Germany of the 1930s. How did the Holocaust unfold? Who were the people who orchestrated it? Who were the people who let it happen? I think we've seen a tremendous rise in anti-Semitism in the United States, something that we should all be concerned about. It's very real. I don't really need to belabor that point for your audiences,
right.
But we need to understand what happened. It's not Germany. It's not the Holocaust. Nothing ever will be, and please God, we won't see anything ever close to it. But it's what we're seeing is definitely similar to some of the ideas and ways that things developed in Germany in the 1920s. We're still, thankfully, at that point.
A lot of people utilize the Holocaust as Shoah, no surprise to you, to relate better to the destruction of Tisha B'Av. Obviously, it's a more recent event. We knew people, or some still know people who are actually, survivors of the Shoah. So obviously, it makes it much more real. Do you think that this rise of anti-Semitism topic would also be appropriate tonight and tomorrow, as rabbinic leaders and camp leaders, etc., are speaking to crowds about Tisha B'Av and about the Shoah. Would it be a good idea for them to relate to everybody what's going on in 2026 United States?
Yes, we should. And we shouldn't lose sight of the goal of Tisha B'Av, which is to talk about the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash and Chorban that has happened throughout history. Anti-Semitism is a big part of Holocaust education today. You can't really separate the two because you need to understand how these things develop. And so, we teach students about the how anti-Semitism has unfolded throughout centuries, millennia of Jewish history, from religious anti-Judaism to racial anti-Semitism and to the various political forms we see today. And so I think we need to teach them as this connection and understanding and talk about, we need to parse the differences and talk about the similarities and understand why anti-Semitism has been so persistent and how it manifests in different ways and across time and place.
Dr. Julie Golding with us on this Erev Tisha B'Av, Holocaust educator, director of the MS program in Holocaust, Genocide and Tolerance Education at Touro University. She's also author of a recently published book, which we discussed earlier in this conversation, and I'm recommending because it sounds amazing, Unseen Scars, Vicarious Trauma at Holocaust Museums, Exhibitions, and Memorial Sites. By the way, can I ask you a question? It's so funny. This actually came up yesterday in a conversation with a friend of mine. Why is it, in your opinion, that a visit to Yad Vashem feels so different than a visit to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, for instance? Is it only because it's in Israel, or do you think it's something beyond that?
When we build a museum, our first thought and our primary goal is audience. So museums, wherever they are meant to talk to the visitors and to the audience who are there. So a museum in New York City is going to look very different from the museum in Warsaw. I was just there last week.
Interesting.
It's a different story. Huh. It's a very different story that we tell. And it's a different story. We mentioned earlier the museum in Washington, D.C., United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. While they're about to redo it, so we don't know yet what their exhibit will look like, the way they wanted visitors to experience the story of the Holocaust was to understand what is it that Americans encountered or knew about the Holocaust. And so when you would come in, you'd see images that American liberators had seen when they first came into the camps. And you learn about the role of American companies like IBM in helping finance the Holocaust. When you go to Yad Vashem, it's the story of the Jewish people. It's the story of rebuilding Israel after the war, the story of the ghetto fighters and their determination to find a Jewish homeland. When you come out of it and you look out at the beautiful forest at Yar Yerushalayim at the end of it, it's just overwhelming. Yeah. And that's probably what you've experienced.
Yeah,
it's a personal story. And a powerful story of being in the land. And that's intentional.
I appreciate the way you outlined that. I think you took a lot of our emotions and, essentially summed it up for us, and I appreciate that. Dr. Julie Golding, how do people get more information about the MS program in Holocaust education at Touro University?
Okay, so our program, we have both a master's degree and an advanced certificate, which takes shorter and is also a terrific program to participate in. You can find us through Touro University's Graduate School of Education. We have information available on our website. You can also contact me directly. I'm very happy to speak with prospective students and answer any questions that people might have.
And I'm assuming that your book, Unseen Scars, is available on Amazon.
It is. It's available on Amazon. It's available through the publisher on Bloomsbury and any other, major retailers out there. But Amazon seems to be a good choice for a lot of people.
I really appreciate you joining us. I thought this was a very appropriate and educational conversation for an Erev Tisha B'Av. I take this opportunity to wish you an easy fast. and the continued success with this at Touro University.
Thank you so much, and same to you and to all of your listeners.
Appreciate that. Dr. Julie Golding, another superstar from Touro University with us here on AJM in the AM Wednesday morning.